Hey Fedheads, welcome to another episode of Sharing Our Pairings. This is episode 21, Smoking Monk Porter. So we're featuring the Smoking Monk cigar from Drew Estate, brought to you by Cigar.com, sponsored by Cigar.com, bringing to you live and in stereo. I'm your host, John the Cigar Surgeon. I'm here with my co-host, Rob. Rob, what's going on, brother?
You are now master of the sweet beanie, dude. That thing is freaking awesome. We'll get into it in a little bit if you're listening on the podcast. John's beanie has got Stormtrooper, just a big Stormtrooper head right on the front of it. It's pretty freaking sweet. Side topic, my wife and I did a kind of touristy thing on her birthday in San Francisco. We went to Fisherman's Wharf and Pier 39 and all that. And they've got this hat store that we kind of went through, and in the back I found all these Star Wars hats. And they were all kid sizes, so I couldn't really partake. But they had these sweet beanies. One, Dana tried on the one. My wife, she tried on one that was brown, but it had the Princess Leia earmuffs on it, you know.
Nice.
And I got one that was a tauntaun head that fit right over my with like the mouth opened up. Yeah, the mouth opened up over my head. It was pretty sweet. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah, we're here to check out the Smoking Monks. This will be the first. We're gonna do all 5 of them. Like you said, sponsored by Cigar.com. If you're watching on Cigar Federation, there's a link there. They've got a special deal for an intro deal, kind of a sampler, so you get one of each of the cigars. Wow, I just got something just landed in my eye, like literally. Wow.
Well, you want me to take over from?
Yeah, please do.
We'll just smoothly hand over as he tries to repair his eye. Again, all the podcast listeners are fortunately spared from this because they just have to listen. They don't have to worry about anything. So, as Rob was saying, we're doing a feature on the Smoking Monk. There's a 5-cigar series. This week we'll be doing the Porter. Next week is the IPA, which is going to be a bit of a tough one, I think. We've got the Imperial Stout, Hefeweizen, and to wrap it all up, the Triple Belgian. And I'm pretty stoked. I think this is going to be a really interesting 5-part series.
You know, I saw someone posted a question and asked about the order that we're doing them in, and I didn't really pick an order. I just kind of put them in there. So, or I don't know. Did I even do it, John? Did you schedule them out? I don't think we had much. I'd like to say that there was some elegant reason as to why we're doing them in the order that we're doing them, but no, just kind of happenstance that we're doing Porter first.
You know, we don't want to let people behind the curtain too much, but here at Sharing Our Pairings, we like to play a little fast and loose. You know, we like to set up sometimes 5 minutes before the show. Sometimes we just like to roll with it because, you know, we believe it brings a more natural and better show to you. So, sure, let's just tell you we had a really grand plan, but in reality, no, we didn't really have a grand plan. We just wanted to roll with what came with it. If it was up to me, we probably would have done the IPA as one of the last ones because I think it's going to be maybe one of the tougher pairings. But you know what? It's the show. Thanks very much for everyone for tuning in live.
Yeah, back to live. John is braving the elements up there in the Great White North. It's kind of sunny and about like, I don't know, 58 degrees here for me, but I think you're down in like the teens. So we'll get started and start plowing through this. Which is I know we've each got 3 different beers. You're looking at on Cigar Federation. You can see the different beers that we went with. I picked up a Fuller's London Porter. I selected that because that is one of the recommended pairings, and I don't know if they're recommended by Cigars International, Cigar.com, or if it's recommended by Drew Estate. It's this cigar is specifically available through Cigars International and Cigar.com. But in the magazine, I get their catalog every few months or whatever. They had a list of recommendations, and the London Porter was the only one on that list that I could track down. So I picked that one up, and actually realized, and I'm kind of throwing my local Bevmo under the bus, but I picked it up and I bought these over the weekend, and they are best before December 12th of last year. So a little bit out of date, not a big run on the London Porter. I also went with the Black Butte Porter from Deschutes. We've had Deschutes on the show before.
Oh yeah, fantastic brewery.
Yeah, they do some good stuff. I'm excited about this porter. I haven't tried it yet. And Shallow Grave Porter from Heretic, and I think I've featured Heretic or at least talked about them on the show before. I had a chocolate hazelnut porter that they make, which is really, really good. I wanted to get something that wasn't quite as sweet for this show. I wanted to go just straight porters with no hazelnut or chocolate or donut or raspberry or anything in there. So those are my choices. I think I'm going to start with the London Porter. John, what did you go with?
So I think we're in the same page. I had a tough time finding porters. Stouts were not a problem. IPAs were not a problem, but for whatever reason, maybe it's just a seasonal thing. I ended up with 3 porters that I hadn't tried, and I kind of cheated because I had the London Porter when I was, spoiler alert, doing a review of the Smoking Monk Porter for next week, and the beer I had in stock in my overflowing fridge is the London Porter, and it's kind of a regular appearance in my fridge. But the ones I went with was the Maine Beer Company King Titus Porter, which I've never had, the Stone Brewing Smoked Porter, and the Stone Brewing I think we've featured them on the show before. They make some really good beers.
Sure.
Pretty much can pick up anything off the shelf. And then a new one for me, but a cool brewery we'll talk about later, is Central City, and it's an Imperial Porter, which seemed to drive some discussion, which we'll get into later, and certainly some questions regarding what is an Imperial Porter.
That is a good question. Let's kind of get started here. I'll jump in and just start talking about the London Porter, because for once I'm actually prepared, kind of.
Look at you.
To talk about it. Yeah, it's kind of weird, right? So this one, standard 12-ounce bottle. Picked this up in a, hello, in a 4-pack. I want to say it was $10.99 for the 4-pack, so not the cheapest beer around. Pull up some info here off of their website. This won a bunch of awards. International Beer Challenge got a silver in 2012. I don't know if that's a big deal or not. World Beer Awards in 2011. Going all the way back to 1999. International Beer and Cider Challenge. It got the gold. That's pretty snazzy. It gives some kind of their website. It's fullers.co.uk. Fullers. And they actually have some pretty cool information on the site. Breaks down the appearance of the beer. They say it's got a dark oak appearance, and as you can see from the pour, it is pretty dark. I mean, all these are going to be dark. This is probably, of the ones that I've poured, this is the lightest. It's not as dense as some of the others, it looks like. It's got notes of coffee, molasses, and some roasted notes in there. Rich berry fruits, roasted on the lips, I guess. I don't know what that little logo means they've got there. On their bitter chart from 1 to 5, it's got a 2.5. On their sweet chart from 1 to 5, it's got a 3.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and there really isn't too much. The brewer's note here, it's brewed to 5.4% alcohol by volume, so it's not going to blow you away. The London Porter bears outstanding depth and flavor. Of course it does. The blend of brown, crystal, and chocolate malts provide earthy character and a creamy delivery. Creamy. While hints of coffee and chocolate carry through onto the tongue. The range of flavors works well with a wide variety of foods, from rich meat dishes to chocolate puddings. So yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of information on here. Some of the other sites actually have a little bit more. But they'll turn you on to if there's a Fuller pub near you or where you can buy it online, that kind of thing. Although buying beer online still seems kind of foreign to me. I had one of these the other day just to kind of prep for the show because obviously the flavors that we're going to get with the cigar are different, and if I've got a 4-pack, why not? Just an excuse to drink another beer. And it had kind of a standard porter, or at least what I think is a standard porter profile to it. It's got, it's earthy flavors, almost kind of dirty on the finish, and it does have a little bit of sweetness to it, but not like you're going to find with a stout. I don't really know the difference between a porter and a stout, and I'm sure, John, you could probably talk on that more than I can. For me, a porter feels rougher than a stout does. A stout tends to have a smoother mouthfeel to me. It's a bit more creamy. It's a bit more sweet. Usually the ones that I've tracked down, I mean, obviously I've stuck with the chocolate stouts and the oatmeal stouts and things of that nature. But it almost feels, porters feel a bit more aggressive to me, which is odd because they all seem to have less alcohol, at least from what I've seen. But anyway, that's a little bit on the London Porter. I'm just kind of waxing at this point. So John, why don't you jump in?
Absolutely. So, and for the record, like I said, the London Porter, I enjoy that beer. It's a good mainstream porter. It's well priced. It's tasty. I
Mainstream
enjoy
is
it.
a good way to put it.
Mainstream.
Yeah.
It's not a hipster porter.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever that means. So moving right along. So mine is the Maine Beer Company. It's going to be tough to see because it is getting dark and cold out here, and the nights are long and full of darkness. Um, so this is the King Titus from Maine Beer Company. Now, Maine Beer Company is not a company that I'm very familiar with, but I love one of the things we do on the show, either during the show or before the show, is reading up. And so you can go to the website, Main Street, boy, it is dark, mainbeercompany.com. So first of all, 1% of their gross sales or their total sales go to environmental nonprofits, which I think is pretty cool. You don't see a lot of beer companies really doing that, so that seems really responsible. They're fairly new. They started in the summer of 2009. As the name sort of lends itself, they are located in Freeport, Maine. This beer is a little bit more of a heater than some of the other porters we've got. It's got an ABV of 7.5%, so that is kind of getting into the quote-unquote stout territory, and we'll get into that maybe more later. The original gravity, as one would expect if you've been paying attention to our previous shows, is 1075. 75, you notice the 1075, that's the ABV. They also list a variety of malts, which mean absolutely nothing to me, but maybe some of you beer geeks out there can set it straight. It's got an American two row, I should say, a caramel 40L, caramel 80L, a Munich 10L, a chocolate roasted wheat and flaked oats. I don't know whether to drink that or eat that. And then finally on hops, it's got Centennial and Columbus. So again, a lot of that stuff is way over our heads, but if you can see in the darkness here, I mean that is darkness.
Black.
That is black, and we're going to see that a lot with these porters. They're intended to be a darker beer, although historically, and again we'll kind of wax that as we go along, porters weren't necessarily darker. You'd normally expect that out of a stout, and that comes along with, and this is for Jarrett Grillet out there who's going to lose his mind, the toasted barley, which is what primarily will distinguish a porter from a stout. Although a lot of times the two get kind of intermixed, and through history they've really been intermixed. Today, for the most part, toasted barley is what's going to determine whether it's a porter or a stout. Not always, but most of the time. And as Rob already mentioned, you're going to find porters have a lower ABV, usually around the 6.5, maybe below the 6 mark, where an imperial porter or imperial stout, I should say, or an oatmeal stout is going to sit in the 8, 8.5, 9.5 range. So those are kind of two distinguishing characteristics. Again, it's kind of become a blended thing, so when we talk about porters and stouts, there's a lot of crossover, but maybe that helps some of our listeners, and maybe it does, and maybe it'll get some more discussion going offline.
Yeah, and I've made this abundantly clear on the show. I'll drink it. I don't know too much about the back end. I don't know what makes this different than a stout. I feel like if I tasted a couple side by side, I might be able to tell you the difference, but
Yeah.
for the most part, I mean, to me, like I said earlier, a porter is just a bit more it's a dirty version of a stout, or at least that's the way I think about it. It's a bit more earthy, both up front and on the finish, or at least in my experience. And my experience is quite limited. Talk a little bit about the pairing. For me, I like the cigar better without this beer, and I like the beer better without the cigar. It's interesting because this was one of the recommended pairings. To me, it brings out a bitterness in the beer, and I think we've kind of established that when you smoke the cigar and you're smoking a cigar and you're drinking a beer, especially a dark beer, it tends to bring out a little bit of that bitterness is going to come out, and that's an experience that we've had in the past. To me, the pairing feels a little bit off. There's a lot of talk about, are these cigars infused, are they not? I think, John, you just got back from Cigar Safari, so you might have more info on that than I do. I reached out, like I said, this show is sponsored by cigar.com, so I reached out to the guys over there. Didn't really get a definitive answer in the email that I got. This is after asking around, the consensus is, quote unquote, no one knows. I do have the wrapper on this is Maduro, and it is a medium strength. That's all I got. I can tell you that there is a different, and I'll say the same thing about the stout when we do the stout show, because I've already smoked the stout and I'll have my review for that posted tomorrow. There's some interesting flavors in there. I don't think that they're infused cigars, but I think they're using some interesting tobacco. I mean, I know Matt reviewed the IPA. Was it the IPA or the hef?
It was the IPA. Yeah.
And he said he thought that there was some fire cured tobacco in there, and there may very well be, but there really hasn't been an offering from Drew Estate as to what is in these. I don't think they're infused. It doesn't. Infused cigar has a feeling to it. When you smell it, I mean, they've got the sweetened tips for the most part and everything. These cigars don't have anything like that. Although I will say, when I was smoking the stout, I was outside and I was smoking it, and I was drinking a old Russian Rasputin Old Russian Stout, Imperial Stout, which is what I'm pairing with in my review. And my wife came out and she said, "Oh, I thought you were smoking your pipe."
Interesting.
Based on the aroma. And so because she was going to come and sit with me, because she usually does, she'll come and hang out for a bit when I'm smoking a pipe. And although some of the stuff that Logan sent me now, she doesn't really come around when I'm smoking some of the English blends. But
we're getting way off topic now.
No, we are. But anyway, so are they infused? Or are they not? I don't think they're infused, but I think that there's some interesting tobacco in there.
You'll get my thoughts right after this break. You're listening to Sharing Our Pairings, episode 21, Smoking Monk. This is the Smoking Monk Porter. You're listening live or on podcast. Thanks very much for our podcast listeners. This series of webcasts is sponsored by Cigar.com, who provided the cigars. Cigar, of course, is by Drew Estate, the rebirth of cigars. Going back to what you're talking about with the infusion, in my unprofessional opinion, they are not there.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm John Burgundy. They're absolutely not infused. Although I can sort of, as a spoiler to some of the other cigars we're going to smoke as we continue on our shows, I definitely got the distinct impression on the nosing the wrapper, that perhaps these sat in storage next to or in the vicinity of infused cigars, because off the wrapper I'm definitely getting a hint of infusion, but when I sort of really get in there and sniff around and then light it up and smell the smoke, and as you say, infused cigars have a particular taste to them. It's absolutely undeniable. You can immediately tell. As far as the porter goes, absolutely I would stake my reputation 100% that it is not infused, but as you say, I think they're using some interesting tobacco in here that has not been used in some of the other lines. I know, talking to Johnny Brook down at Cigar Safari, this project goes back a few years, so who knows what kind of tobacco is being used in this project. It's stuff that may have never been used in anything else. As far as the pairing goes, it's interesting that you're talking about the London Porter, and it's a bit of a spoiler for my trailer or my review coming up. I wasn't a huge fan. It was good. It didn't blow me away. I really enjoy the cigar on its own. I really enjoy the porter, the London Porter on its own. I'm actually really enjoying this, and maybe it's the cold, because I can't. The Maine beer company, King Titus, is a lot sweeter than the London Porter, and I think that helps, because I find the Smoking Monk Porter has got a little bit of earth and a little bit of leather to it. It needs something sweeter to kind of cut through that. So there's kind of an almost blackberry, a blueberry taste to this porter. There's a little bit of toastiness as well, but the sweetness of the porter kind of cuts through. And this is actually not bad. This is better for me than my experience with the London Porter in this cigar.
We've got a few audience questions. You want to jump in and take one now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, we got this one's from Dave Nichols, friend of the show. Dave, thank you for everything that you do on Cigar Federation. You do a lot on the site, and I don't think I've ever actually personally thanked you, so thank you for everything you do on the site. Compliment bank. Okay, says, this being your first pairing with the Smoky Monk, do you feel you've started with the best or easiest? Basically, I find porters and stouts to be the best beer with a cigar, full body, slightly sweet, strong flavors, complement a cigar pretty well. Dave, we touched on this a little bit in the intro. I think that, yeah, we started with an easier one. Excuse me. We started with an easier one. I think the stout, after having smoked the cigar and paired it, I think that's definitely going to be the easiest.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I think the one that I'm most curious about is the Hefeweizen, or Hefeweizen, however you say it.
Hefeweizen.
Yeah. And I'm curious about the triple Belgian because honestly, I don't even know if I've ever had a triple Belgian beer. I really don't.
Sure you have. Sure you have. A lot of those beers you've tasted out of Quebec. A lot of those are triple Belgians. They just don't mark them as triple Belgians.
Really? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, this is all going to be a learning curve for me for some of this stuff. But anyway, do I feel like we started with the easiest one? I think the porter and the stout are definitely going to be the easiest. I don't think it was intentional.
Nope.
But no, that's my opinion. Do you have any other thoughts to give on that, John?
Oh, I agree. It definitely wasn't intentional. I mean, yeah, it's great that we started with one of the easier ones for sure. Because hey, I'm lazy. I mean, I work hard, work less, something like that. Anyways, yeah, I mean, it's great that we started sort of eased in with the porter. It would have been good to start with the stout. Interestingly enough, I think next week we're going to sort of roll into one of the harder ones, which is the IPA, and we've talked about this in previous shows. We've done beer pairings, and IPA is a really, really tough pairing to do. IPAs typically are very bold flavors, very bright flavors. The hops can really overpower just about anything. So it's interesting because we're going to go from perhaps one of the easier pairings to one of the more difficult pairings, possibly even the most difficult pairing of this entire five show series. So good question, Dave.
So a little bit of a spoiler for the IPA show. I'm actually going to grab.
Breaking news.
I was going to pull it out of the fridge, but I'll grab it later. I think I might do Pliny the Elder with that
snap.
pairing.
Did you get your hands on some Piney?
I do. Well, it's local. I have some places. The Russian River's right up the street, and I was actually going to go last weekend. And when you go, you can buy a certain amount depending on the day or whatever. You can get growlers or you can get cases, or 6-packs or whatever. My local spot has they get them weekly, and it's one per customer. But if I can go up to the spot, I can get a few. I was going to go this past weekend, but they're actually right now pouring Pliny the Younger, which people go friggin' nuts about, and it's like an 8-hour wait. So I'm really glad that I looked before I left, because yeah, that'd be great to have it, but I'm not waiting 8 hours for anything except sleep. I'll wait 8 hours to go to sleep, but that's about it.
Yeah, 8 hours is a heck of a. I mean, that's supposed to be a phenomenal beer, and I would absolutely love to get my hands on it, whether I need to fly down to California or not. But waiting 8 hours, no, that's crazy town.
Well, we'll talk about that more next week. But anyway, I might do that. So I've got one in the fridge. Maybe that'll be fun. So I'm gonna.
Right along.
Oh yeah. Let's move on to our next.
Second beer. What do you got? What do you got for your second beer?
Second beer. I'm gonna go with the Deschutes Black Butte Porter. It's not Black Butt. It's Black.
Oh yeah.
And when we mentioned earlier that Deschutes had already been on the show, we and I forget who it was. Somebody in the chat rooms had asked if we had Deschutes on before, and I think that was the seasonal or like winter ale. You had the Jubal Ale, right?
Yeah, that sounds right. That's right. Yeah, it was very, very tasty.
I know we've had them on. I think that was maybe we've had more offerings from Deschutes on. I'm not sure, but they're from Bend, Oregon. Oregon is a mecca of beer production over the last 10, 15 years.
Absolutely.
So let's see. Looking at their website is very, very informative. Looking at the Black Butte, Porter, 5.2% alcohol by volume, which is that's what it says in the bottle. I thought it said something different. So again, not a ton of alcohol by volume. The IBUs are 30 or 30 IBUs or however you say that. So the lower number is not quite as bitter. Yes.
That's right.
Okay. So I'm learning. 192 calories per 12-ounce serving. So if I put this whole thing back, I'll get some calories. So with the dark beer as our first and flagship brand, Black Butte defines Deschutes as a radical player. Okay. Slight hop bitterness up front enhances the distinctive chocolate and roasted finish. Roasted. Maybe that's a better way for me to describe porters. They have that roasted flavor to them. Yeah. It's got a creamy mouthfeel. Malts. It uses pale, carapils, chocolate, crystal, and wheat. Cascade, Bravo, and Tetnang. Hops.
I actually recognize Cascade hops, and I'm not sure why. I'm not sure if that's because advertising is finally stuck in my brain. I don't know what it means, but I actually recognize Cascade hops.
Yeah, I've heard that before too. And this beer's won a ton of awards, and they've got some pub recipes. Man, you can make a Black Butte Porter barbecue sauce, marinate a rack of lamb, brewery mustard with Black Butte Porter, baby back ribs. Like they've got clams, spice cake that you can make with this, Italian sausage, Black Butte Porter, chocolate chip and walnut cookies. I'm gonna get the wife on that for sure.
Post haste.
For show. They've got the homebrew recipe on here. Said it pairs well with salmon and wild rice, elk burger, and onion soup. An elk burger is an interesting choice. I don't know if they have a restaurant or something. Maybe that makes sense for. But anyway, there's a ton of information on that. As you can see, this is another very, very dark beer. It's hard to tell, but I don't know if you can even see that the one on the left, this one here, is a little bit lighter, and that's the London Porter that I had before. But that's kind of the specs on that, and I'm going to dive into it here while you're talking.
Yeah, so my second beer, it's what you just finished pouring. Hopefully I got some really cool sounds on the audio track there, is from Stone Brewery. Stone, this is the smoking porter, and Stone is actually a brewery that goes back quite a ways to 1996. It's a California brewery. Originally they were located in, I don't even know, but they moved because they outgrew their facilities to Escondido, California in 2005. If you want to check out more about their company, stonebrewing.com. Got a pretty cool website. It's very modern. So this smoked porter, I should say, goes back to 1996. So it's one of their original brews, which is kind of cool. It's got an ABV of 5.9%. So back to what we were talking about earlier, this one is sort of in the normal range of what we consider for porters. I can kind of see it. It's, again, tough to see. It's very much lighter than the first one. This is almost a dark brown or sort of a medium brown color, a little bit translucent. So it's not as black as the other one. The hops that are used in here are Magnum and Mount Hood. And this does have a little bit higher IBU. So we talked about in some of our previous shows IBU, which is International Bitterness Unit, and this is a 53. So what that means is you're going to get a little bit more of that hoppy presence, even though the alcohol content is lower. You're going to see a lot more presence from the hoppiness in here. And I'll be honest, I'm really kind of stoked to try this. I haven't cracked it yet. So
Taking a couple pulls on the Black Butte Porter, and one thing that I've learned on this show is don't judge it after your first sip. I mean, you gotta let the palate acclimate a little bit, get a little bit more coated. Learned that a little bit with we were at our Winter Beer Fest here in Concord, where I hung out with some other cigar guys, and they tried to get me to like bitter beers or sours, not bitters, sours. I'm getting confused. Bitters you put into your cocktail. And I just couldn't do it, man. And they said, oh, well, you have to get used to it. You have to get used to it. I said, you know what? There's plenty of beer out there that I don't need to get used to that I like already. Maybe when I reach the end of that, I'll go back and try some sours. But the same thing, kind of let your palate acclimate. So after the first few sips, the pairing is much smoother to me. The Black Butte Porter just, all in all, feels like a better beer. It tastes better. It's better, relatively speaking. Better in my opinion. It's got smoother flavors. Again, I'm pairing this so that they're getting drowned out a little bit, but there's definitely some chocolate in there. There's definitely that roasted malty flavor in there. The combination of the cigar and the beer brings out some interesting citrus notes that are almost similar to what I was getting from the London Porter, but not as harsh. They seem to make more sense here for some reason. It's like sometimes you see some chocolate and like orange, or chocolate and lime, or chocolate and a citrus flavor. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. For me, this is one of those times that it does. It's a nice, tight citrus flavor, hits the side of the tongue, and pairs really well with the cigar. The cigar, in and of itself, doesn't have a ton of mind-blowing flavor. That's one thing that I think if people smoke these on their own and they don't pair them, they might be disappointed. because at least that's been my experience so far with the two that I've smoked. They pair really well. On their own, they leave a little bit to be desired, and I think that was the whole idea behind the whole project. So I don't think that I'm speaking out of turn or saying anything wrong or rude. I feel like that was the intended idea, and I feel like they've done a pretty good job. The flavor of the cigar there's a little bit of chocolate in there, pairs really well with with the beer, or at least with the Deschutes, I should say. And real quick, John, before we jump into yours, I got another question here. This is another one from Dave Nichols that he just posted up. I'm just going to answer it real quick. He says, Rob, you said something about a recommended porter for this particular cigar. Is there an actual list of recommendations by Drew Estate? I don't know if the list is produced by Drew Estate or not. The only place I've seen it is in the cigar.com monthly catalog. So if you get that publication, if you've ever bought anything from them, you'll get it. It's in there. And I think if you flip through, there's a page. They've got a Pilsner glass, and then the text is all on the side. And they give you kind of a write-up for each, a write-up and a recommendation for each one. I actually have them all. I sent them all to John so we could make sure that we at least hit one for each show. And I'll post it up actually up on Cigar Federation somewhere so you guys can see it. I don't know, again, if it's a cigar.com list or if it's a Drew Estate recommendation list, but it is in the magazine, so that was where I got that from. But anyway, so answer that question, John. You're up.
Nice. Well, it's interesting because you're going to a more fuller body porter, and I'm kind of going backwards here. So I think my order might have been a little mixed up, mostly because I had no idea what to expect out of these beers. So for the Stone Brewing Smoking Porter, it's a much more I don't want to use the word delicate, but it's less in your face than the King Titus. So while the King Titus might be a little bit more towards stout territory, where you're getting a much fuller, earthier, richer, maltier, smoked flavor. The smoking porter, I keep calling it the smoking porter. The smoked porter is got a lot more of that IPA quality. So there's a lot more, as you were saying, with the citrus notes. I'm getting that now because this Stone Brewing is just, it's lighter. It's I'd say the flavor is more complex from the sense that it's not a very, very strong in your face flavor. So it's taken me a few sips to sort of really gather all the notes that are going on there. And it's interesting because it is different. It's pairing quite differently with the cigar, and I'm still unsure whether it's better, worse, or the same, except to say that it's bringing different qualities out of the cigar. So I was saying with the first King Titus Porter, I was getting a lot of sweetness, which was cutting through the earth and the leather of the cigar. With the citrus notes, it's almost bringing a vanilla out of this Smoking Monk Porter, which wasn't there before, at least not to my taste buds. So it's a different experience, and it's interesting to see two beers in the sort of quote unquote same category of porters, but I'm getting two very, very different drinking experiences here.
And I believe, I'm 99% sure this is correct. With Stone Brewery, they also do a vanilla porter, which is fantastic.
And they just released a Chipotle porter, which I gotta tell you, yeah, I heard Chipotle porter, and I'm like, oh my god, I gotta get my hands on that because that sounds like a heater.
Yeah, and there's that sriracha from Rogue. We're getting off topic, but I think we need to do like just a complete weird beer show.
Absolutely.
Just weird beer, but what the hell would we pair it with? Anyway, the more that I sip on this Black Butte, the more I really start to appreciate it. That citrus that I was getting up front, and I don't know if that was kind of a transition from my palate from what I was drinking before to what it is now. It's died down a lot, smoothed out. The chocolate flavors are really, really nice. I'm picking up a burnt caramel note on, or almost like a burnt caramel, or almost like a roasted marshmallow type flavor on the retrohale from the Smoking Monk, and that wasn't there before. So I don't know if there's something in the beer that's really kind of bringing that out, the way that they're kind of playing together. This is a really, really nice pairing. And let's see, there was another question here, and I'm trying to get through some of these questions. John, I don't know if you're looking at them or not, but This one's from Jared Grillett, and he says, seeing as you have a wide array of porter selections that we're sampling tonight, he says, what differences can you make out between English and / traditional made porters and American versions? To be honest, I would assume that the London Porter that I had was a traditional English version. And given that this Black Butte doesn't really taste all that different, but it's like a better execution of, it seems like the same techniques. I think that these are both probably traditional based on his question. So I don't know if I can really plug in a lot of information there. That traditional flavor is going to be, and Jared knows this because he knows his beer, but that traditional flavor is going to be that roasted, that malty flavor, a little bit of chocolate, and notes like that, that a heavier type flavor. I've had some other porters in the past. I'm not having them today. One that I mentioned was from Heretic. It was a hazelnut and chocolate porter. That tasted an awful lot like a chocolate stout to me. It was a lot smoother. It had more sweetness to it. So maybe that falls into the category of an American version. I'm not sure. John, I'm figuring you can probably speak more on this than I can.
Well, I think we kind of touched base a little bit already just before we took the question, because I think what sets aside American breweries from London breweries or UK breweries, and hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn here, is that American breweries aren't afraid to sort of mess around, try new things. We just finished talking about Stone Brewing has a vanilla bean porter, and they have a chipotle porter. Well, chipotle, there's just no way that a brewing company in the UK would be putting chipotle in their beer. I mean, that's so not traditional method of brewing. So I think, if you're looking for a traditionally good example of a particular type of beer, then go with a UK beer, because you're going to get a very traditionally brewed beer. But if you're looking to branch out after you've established within a certain beer, whether it's a porter, whether it's an IPA, whatever that might be, and you're looking to try something a little bit new, different, that maybe pushes the envelope of that category, there's so many American breweries out there. There's so many fantastic breweries. We've talked a lot about them in the past shows. We're talking a little bit about them today that really push that envelope of category of beer. I mean, we just talked about the Rogue Sriracha. I can't wait to get my hands on that Stone Brewing Vanilla and the Chipotle. I mean, that's going to be a very, very different taste experience, and I think it's going to be a very different pairing experience, because I don't think you can just pair the same cigar with that type of porter than you can with a traditional style of porter.
Absolutely. I mean, that's when you start talking about, well, we kind of answered Jared's question, so I'm going to click that. You start talking about some of these funky beers, how the hell are we going to pair those?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we have a hard enough time getting it right when we know exactly what we're going to be drinking. Luckily, Drew Estate was nice enough to blend these for porters, so it made our decision easy. And we've also got some cigars coming up, and after we do these 5 Smoky Monk shows, we'll be covering some cigars that are blended specifically for whiskey. So that'll be fun. But some of that funky stuff, man. I don't know. Like when I was at that beer festival, I tried a chili beer. It had or cayenne pepper or whatever it was in there, and it's just like it tasted like a Budweiser, but it had all kinds of spice on it. I just didn't like it. And Harley Holmes was there with me, and first time I got to meet Steve in person, and he is tall, man. Woo! 6'4", something like that. Woo! And I'm like 5'9", like I'm about as average, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? And I guess he'll marinate chicken in that chili beer overnight, and then barbecue it. Says it's great. So who knows? Maybe it doesn't taste that good, but you can put it in chicken, or like the Black Butte Porter, you can put it in some chocolate and walnut cookies.
There you go. So you're listening to Sharing Our Pairings, episode 21, Smoking Monk Porter featured. This is a live show broadcast to you around the world in stereo, sponsored by Cigar.com. Just to answer a question in our chat room earlier about where you can buy these, Cigar.com actually has a 5-pack sampler going right now. If you're looking to try one of these styles and you don't want to go too deep on 5-packs, they've got a great 5-pack sample, which we'll be posting the link to after the show. You can, of course, buy them in 5-pack. They're also sold as a box of 20 as well. If you really like a particular style, you can get a box of 20. So that's singles, samplers, 5-packs, and box of 20, and we'll be posting a link after the show. I think moving right along, maybe we should start powering through some of these questions before we go into our third show, our third beer, I should say.
Yeah, I'll drink more of this this Black Butte. I've got no problem with that.
All right.
But I don't want you to freeze your nuggets off out there either. So.
Nah, it's all good. I'm Canadian. My blood is made of something plus whiskey plus something, so I'll be fine. There's a really good question. I'm going to see if I can find it here in this Q&A app. This is my first time using the Q&A app.
So click the little select button, and then it'll.
Nice. So this is a question from Jacob Schreiber. Jacob asks, he said he posted this on the event page, but he wants us to speak to future Drew Estate beer collaborations, maybe provide a sneak peek in what's in development. You know, I was just down at Cigar Safari. I got a good chance to hang out with Jonathan Drew, and he's a pretty cool guy. If you've ever met him in person, he's pretty memorable. I also got to hang out with Johnny Brook for a bit, talk a little bit about pairings, and although I don't have anything definitive, I can tell you that, you know, Johnny Brook does a pretty cool and quick pairing segment on Drew Estate. If you're not subscribed, you should subscribe to their YouTube channel. And right now they kind of are all over the board, and they'll kind of pair anything. They'll pair. They just did a show on Soda Pop. So although we don't have anything definitive, I can say absolutely it's my expectation that I think you're probably going to see some future collaborations in the future. I know for a fact that they have their Pappy Van Winkle cigar coming, which unfortunately I didn't get a chance to see, but we talked a lot about it. So there's some really interesting barrel-aged tobacco, and you can better believe they're going to be paired with some Pappy Van Winkle, which is pretty cool. So maybe not specifically in the beer collaboration market, but you're going to see some whiskey collaboration, some bourbon collaboration, and you know, I think Rob even touched on it if you were tuning in last week on Thursday to the Cigar Chat. We're really seeing a lot of this come out. You know, the show kind of started, I think we're 8 or 9 months in now, and we're seeing a lot more talk and a lot more vendors and a lot more manufacturers talking about pairing their cigar with a beverage. You know, 1502 famously likes to, Enrique loves to pair cigars with rum. That's his thing. JD absolutely loves to pair with bourbon. He likes his Lafroig. So, you know, I think that's becoming a lot pretty mainstream. So hopefully, you know, hopefully that answers his question.
Yeah, and yeah, Jacob, just to expound on that a little bit, and you know, maybe get outside of the realm of Drew Estate, but like John had mentioned, we had Terrence from Casada Cigars on Cigar Chat last week, and I was smoking the Casada Keg, which was blended to be paired. It was actually blended specifically to pair with Guinness for St. Patrick's Day, which I will probably do on St. Patrick's Day. I paired it with a chocolate stout, campfire stout from Highwater Brewing, which I freaking love. God, that beer's so damn good. Local place, I don't know if they distribute nationally, but if they do, and you see Highwater Campfire Stout, and you like a good chocolate stout, a little bit of, it tastes like s'mores. That's why they call it campfire. Fantastic.
Damn. That sounds fantastic.
But I mean, you've got the Casada Oktoberfest. You've got, I know CAO did a thing with Flying Dog Brewery a year or so ago, where they sold the packages together. Dram, is it Dram or Drum?
It is Dram, yeah.
Dram, I got it right. Dram cigars, like I said, we're going to be doing some shows with them in the future, and those are blended specifically to pair with whiskeys, and not just whiskey in general. I mean, there's 4 different pairings for 4 different classifications of whiskey, and they're very specific about the way that they blend it. So there's a lot. It seems like there's a lot of pairing stuff going on, and I honestly, I think I'm just going to take credit for it. This show really, you know, once we started sharing our pairings, everybody said, you know, we better get on board. So I think we did it.
Yeah, innovate, don't follow. We're all about the innovation.
Absolutely, I'll take credit for it. Why not?
Dare to pair.
Yeah, why not?
Dare to pair. All right, so moving right along to our third beer, which will undoubtedly spawn some great questions. What do you got queued up for number 3?
Let's see. I haven't cracked it open yet, but I will here in a second. I have got Heretic Shallow Grave Porter. It's a little bit ominous.
Oh yeah.
So their website, Heretic actually is pretty local to me. They're in Fairfield, California, which is just up the road. Their website was a little bit. They've got a lot of different brews. So they give you just a little bit of information on each one. Shallow Grave, big dark ale with complex rich chocolate and caramel malt character, followed by a touch of warmth and a light malt sweetness. Blah blah blah, leaving you ready for more after each shovelful. Play on the Shallow Grave thing. The alcohol by volume 7%, so a little bit more in this one, a little bit more alcohol, but that's probably on the high end for a porter. John, wouldn't you say 7%?
Yeah, I think most of the porters we've seen, like traditionally, quote-unquote traditional porters, you can range from about 5.5 to 7's kind of the upper end. I mean, yeah. 7 is definitely pushing stout territory from what we've been seeing in beer selection.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm looking forward to this one. The IBU is 33, so it's not going to have too much bitterness to it. And here's a new one, John, I think, and they've got this for every beer, the SRM.
Yeah, so that's interesting that you bring that up because, and maybe we'll just talk about it right now. So Central City, which is the last beer for me, also had SRM, and I went, okay, here we go. You know, this is beer term number 700. We're getting a beer education, or however you want to say it. So we talked a little bit about this, believe it or not, in an earlier show. SRM is another way of calling it a Lovabond, and right. So if everyone remembers, and hopefully you've been paying attention to our previous episodes, and if you haven't, please subscribe and listen. It's a very, the simple way for me to describe it is, it's how dark your beer is. So, you know, when I was seeing, typically if you're looking at a nut brown ale, you're looking at about 20 SRMs or Lovabonds, and then when you get into the 40 SRMs, you're really talking a very, very dark, rich beer. So how many SRMs did that bad boy have?
33. So
that's pretty
33.
Dark.
So it's pretty dark, and as you can see, it's hard to tell with the lighting, but this is probably, you know, this and the Black Butte are about the same. The London Porter is a good 3 or 4 shades lighter. So I mean, if I had to throw an SRM on that, I would say it's probably, if this is 33, that the London Porter's got to be maybe in the high 20s. I don't know, whatever that really means. So yeah, just cracked it open, and you know, I'm going to take this is not a sponsor thing by any means, but I want to point it out because I think this thing is really cool. And since we're talking about beer, I got this as a Christmas gift, and this is a bottle breacher, and I don't know if you guys you can see this. I believe this is a 50 caliber bullet.
Interesting.
It's actually made into a bottle opener. As you can see, this one's got an American flag etched on it. It's kind of hard to tell. It's getting that reflection. But America. But they were on Shark Tank, and with my family, we do kind of a white elephant. We just have fun with the Christmas thing. And my brother-in-law saw them on there, and so he bought one for himself, and then he bought it as the Christmas gift. And actually, they were so popular right after going on to Shark Tank that they couldn't fulfill all the orders, so we didn't get it until the middle of last month. And they actually sent another a keychain that's like, it's a bullet-shaped keychain that's a bottle opener, which they aren't even available for sale yet, but they included that to make up for the fact that they shipped late. So
don't carry that on a plane, Rob. Don't carry that.
Yeah, no kidding. But anyway, I just thought this was pretty cool. This seems like the kind of thing that folks out there would like. So it sits on the bar. It's nice and shiny. They come in, like, they have black, and you can customize it. It's the kind of thing I guess a lot of guys use them for, like groomsmen's gifts or whatever. But just thought I'd put that out there. Not sponsored by any means. They're not giving me any money. I just think it's a really cool product. And I want to say that it's all they're owned by vets and everything, but I don't really know the whole backstory, so I won't go into it too much. But Bottle Breacher is what they're called.
All right. So my third beer, of course, is, as I've been talking about, Central City Brewing. CentralCityBeer.com is where you can find more information about them and their beers. They're a local Canadian beer brewery. I like to throw a Canadian brewery in here because, you know, got to respect all the breweries that are here. We've got some really great breweries. They started in 2003 in Surrey, BC. For those who are paying attention, I am in Alberta, which is on the west of Alberta, west of Canada, I should say. BC is to the west of me by about 8-10 hours. Surrey is about a 10-12 hour drive. Surrey's got some really cool stuff. It's a warm place. They've got great breweries, great wineries. This particular beer is 9% ABV.
Ooh, girl.
It's a heater. So this is an Imperial Porter, and as a part of that, I'll answer Jared Grillett's question on that. This is 60 IBUs, so it's also a heater in hop quality. It has Munich hops, pale hops, Cara Vienna hops, Cara Munich hops, so it's obviously very German, German-inspired. It has German Magnum. Oh, sorry, those were the malts. My apologies. The hops are German Magnum, Centennial, Amarillo, and Simcoe hops. None of that means anything to me. But the SRM on this is 52. So to give you a sense of it, 40 being a stout, this is a 52. I mean, this bad boy is motor oil, and I kid you not, like, this is black. This is probably one of the blacker beers I've ever tasted. And I'll get into the mouthfeel in a few seconds, but this is an extremely, extremely dark beer. This is a limited production. I kind of like their style. It's really cool. But this is a limited production beer, so I'm going to actually finish this after the show and get completely gooned.
Absolutely.
So far I can say right off the bat on this, it is a much heavier mouthfeel to it. Like it's just on a whole other planet from the first two porters, and I kind of expect that. The sort of point that Jared was asking previously about what does Imperial mean? Well, Imperial is just another way of saying extreme. You know, double IPA, triple IPA, Imperial. Imperial means strong. So when you see Imperial, you're going to see a beer that's sort of in your face, high ABV. And Jared's question was really around, you know, calling it out on, okay, stouts and porters, aren't they the same thing? Well, we kind of touched on that a bit at the beginning of the show. They are kind of the same thing, but Wayne Wambles, which is the brewmaster at Cigar City, he had a lot to say on this, and he actually mirrored a lot of the research that I was doing on this, which is predominantly, historically, porters were brown, stouts were darker black. And that's not really the case anymore. We've already seen that half the porters we're drinking tonight are very, very dark. But again, to reiterate, stouts generally will use roasted barley, while porters will not. Porters will also generally be sweeter, where you'll get a lot more of that toasted, bitter quality out of a stout. That's, you know, again, from that toasting the barley, you're going to get some bitterness, you're going to get some espresso. Again, not a definitive rule, just a general guideline. You know, breweries don't need to follow a particular guideline. They're going to do whatever they want. So this is not a hard and fast rule. But originally, porters were brewed to a high gravity and hopping level in England for export. The three typical types were a Baltic porter, a Russian porter, and I didn't even write down the third porter. But
you sound like me.
Know, yeah, no idea. But yeah, so at the end of the day, yes, there's a difference. No, it isn't hard and fast. It's not the same as comparing, say, an ale and an IPA. They're two different categories of beer. There's a lot of overlap between the two categories. Now, I can tell you, tasting this so far, this is a very full-bodied porter. I'm really enjoying this. I mean, this is definitely in the stout category, but it's not as espresso or you know, it doesn't have that toasted quality, but extremely thick. Like, it's got a very thick mouthfeel to it.
I would echo some of those statements about about this Heretic Shallow Grave. It's much more aggressive. It's definitely got a richer, more complex style of profile to it. So we're done with Jared's question there. Sorry, I'm talking to myself. When we're finished with the question, I have to click it off. So
yep.
Anyway, and actually that one I clicked it way too soon. So when they pull up for that question, they're going to get all kinds of stuff that wasn't really directly related to it. But anyway,
that's just how we roll here on Cigar Pairings.
Fast and loose. I mean, we'd like to be inexact. But no, the feel of this is definitely more stout-ish to me. It's like I said, it's a darker beer. It's got a heavier kind of mouthfeel to it, like you were saying. This one doesn't feel thick to me, but it definitely has that bigger, bolder profile than I think even than the Black Butte. It's definitely got that sweetness in there, that roasted malty flavor, but it's almost it's like that with a kick. You know, I mean, there's a little bit more alcohol in there. It's just got a stronger, more bold feel to it. And I think kind of on accident, I drank these beers and sampled them in the right order. Because by now my palate's getting a little bit shot, but the flavor of this beer is standing up with the flavor of the cigar. The cigar is getting a little bit of a burnt quality to it now because I was puffing on it a little bit too hard right there because I think it was going out and I didn't want it to go out. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like of the three pairings, the Black Butte was the best pairing, and I think I like the Black Butte. It's best on its own. But the Heretic would definitely be a pretty close second. Very different. The Heretic almost has a more American type feel to it in comparison to the London Porter. It's just it kind of takes what they did and puts some tattoos on it and it does a few rounds at the gym and it's just like a bit more aggressive. If that makes any sense.
So I think for me, and not to cop out and be a Nancy here, but each of these three beers for me paired very differently, which each of them kind of has their own characteristic, which I liked. The first Maine beer was, I would say, very traditional. Like it's a very traditional porter. Paired really well, paired better for me personally than the London Porter, I think because it had more character to it. It stood up to the cigar a little bit more. The Stone Brewing smoked porter had a little bit more of that IPA quality, which is a little bit sweeter, definitely more hop influence. So that was very different than the King Titus. And lastly, this Central City again this is a full-bodied porter in your face. Might even be running over the cigar a little bit. So really, you've kind of got three different categories to choose from. Do you want something traditional? You go with the King Titus. You want something that's sort of a little American, edgy? Go with the smoked porter from Stone Brewing because you're going to get a lot of that sweet hoppy characteristic. And if you want something just to knock you out, I'm going to say knock you out, go with the Central City Imperial Porter. It's a heater.
Yeah, no, I the way that the cigar is blended, and I can't speak too much, like we said, on the specific blend because I don't know. I know that it's got a Maduro wrapper on it, and I know that it's a medium strength, medium body, medium strength cigar. I think it works well with most porters. I think this Heretic might be running over it a little bit, but this is kind of on, like we said, on the higher end of aggression, maybe. And the same with the last one, Central City?
Central City, yeah.
Excuse me, I got a little hiccup there. Too early for the hiccups. Yeah, I mean, that seems like that's on the higher end of what you're going to find with your average porter. And this kind of leads into our final question from Harley Holmes, where he says he wants to know what non-smoking monk cigars would you recommend with a porter. Just from this experience, I'm going to focus on the Black Butte because it's a really popular porter, at least in this area. I would go with something, medium strength cigar, medium body that's not really going to blow things out. I think a Maduro wrapper really does pair nicely with some of the chocolate notes that you're going to get.
Absolutely.
I mean, off the top of my head, the Jericho Hill would probably pair really nicely with a porter. Something along those lines. Go back and even like a CAO MX2, if they still make those.
They do.
The double Maduro. When you start talking about a triple Maduro and you get into the Arroyo CBT, I think that if you paired that, it might get a little bit funky. With something like that, I'd go with more of like a chocolate stout. But like a double Maduro, like a nub dub, the nub double Maduro would probably pair really nicely. I like to get a little bit of sweetness from the cigar, but at the same time, maybe now that I'm thinking about it, the things that I'm noticing most from the Smoky Monk are the spice on the retrohale. So
yeah.
You want something that's going to have some spice in there too. So, and I think the Jericho Hill really does fit. That cigar fits nicely in a lot of different categories, which is probably why it was our #1 cigar of the year. It was, wasn't it? I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was number one, and then the Norteño was number 2 or number 3, something like that.
Yeah, the Norteño would fit in there too. Those cigars are kind of similar in blend. And actually, the Buckingham, if you picked up some Buckinghams, the Crownhead Buckingham would probably go well because it's got that spice on the finish. So that's where I would go. Nothing too full-bodied in the strength of the cigar because I think you'll blow the beer out of the water.
Yeah, and I think you could even get a little funky if if you really want to get out there. Something even with a Cameroon wrapper might be interesting if you've got a low ABV porter. I think personally because the Cameroon has that nuttiness to it. If you've got a very traditional like a London porter, that might go really well. That nuttiness would sort of offset the toasted quality of that porter. Um, this was sort of asked at the beginning of the show, what order, what difficulty level are we pairing this in? Well, the thing with porters, and certainly we'll find out with our stout show, they pair really well with a lot of, like Rob was saying, medium-bodied cigars. So if you pick up anything with a Maduro wrapper, like I said, even with a Cameroon wrapper, as long as you're going medium strength, that cigar is going to stand up with a porter really nicely. And I think that's, if you're looking to experiment a little bit with pairings, that's a pretty easy way to go. Grab something out of your humidor with a Maduro wrapper, pour a little glass of a porter, try it out. If it sucks, move on. But there's lots of, Maduro wrappers are kind of the new hotness, or at least they were in the new hotness in 2014. So there's lots to choose from. I've enjoyed this. Believe it or not, I think I've enjoyed the Smoking Monk Porter more with the pairing we've done tonight because I've gotten a varietal difference between the different beers than just sticking to one beer. So maybe that's part of the show that I'm getting used to trying different stuff, and that's more interesting for me. But I've tried it with the London Porter. I've tried it with 3 different beers tonight. It pairs differently with every beer, and it gives a different experience, which is kind of what we're after on this show, anyways.
Yeah, I've actually found myself a couple of times over the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks, and we haven't done a pairing show. When Logan and I, excuse me, we're doing the pipe show. And moving forward, we're gonna alternate every Wednesday. It'll be pipes one week and then pairings the next. It's a little bit funky with Logan being in India right now, so we will be sharing our pairings again next week. But I've actually found myself getting a few beers that are along the same lines, sitting down with a cigar and just kind of pairing it on my own, not necessarily for a show, but just because it's fun. And the good thing about that is I could sip on one, have some water, take a couple puffs of the cigar, sip on another one, and go through it a little bit quicker. And then by the time I'm, an inch or so into the cigar, I've already settled on a beer, and there's my pairing. And so that's the rest of that's my next hour is, hanging out and enjoying that. But yeah, to get back to Harley's question, I think, Maduro wrapper is gonna go nicely. I think the Cameroon would be interesting to see. We've talked about Cameroon wrappers on the show more than I talk about Cameroons ever. So I feel like we should do a Cameroon show, and maybe we'll do that. We'll do that as spring rolls around. But yeah, I mean, the winner for me tonight, the clear winner, was the Black Butte Porter from Deschutes. The pairing was kind of perfect. I do like the cigar. The way that it's paired or blended to pair with these porters is really nice. I don't know. I haven't smoked it on its own, and I probably should have before the show. And maybe I'll do that next week. Smoke the cigar on its own, just so I can get a better. Feel like that'll give me a little bit more to talk about as far as the cigar is concerned. We didn't talk about the cigar all that much.
No, we really should have, but that's the problem with doing a pairing show. So, I mean, we could sit here and drink and do a 3-hour show. I'd be a frozen popsicle by the end of it. I think for me, the top pairing I think would be the King Titus if I had to pick one. But as I said, each of them were kind of unique in their own. And I think just to mirror what you said at the beginning of the show, and this is not a detriment to the cigar, but the cigar is it's a medium-bodied cigar. It's not an expensive cigar. You can pick them up at cigar.com. There's a 5-pack sampler. They're very, very well priced, and they're not going to blow you away in terms of flavor complexity because they're not designed to blow you away in terms of flavor complexity. And I think, just maybe to back you up a little bit on what you're talking about at the beginning of the show, I mean, if this is a very, very complex cigar, I think a lot of those notes would get lost when you're pairing with a beer, right? Mm-hmm. And we find that because, it's almost like music where if you're talking a really complex piece of music and then you're just blasting it, well, you're going to take away a lot of the nuances, and that's probably one of the tough things they found when they're originally blending the cigar is that you can't put a ton of nuance in the cigar because it's going to be lost on anybody who's pairing it with a porter. So does it pair well with a porter? Yeah, like we said, the porter pairing is it's a pretty good way to start, and we certainly had a good time pairing it tonight. We're probably gonna have a tougher time when we get into some of the more complex ones, the triple Belgians, the IPAs. But Smoking Monk is a good pairing.
Yeah, and I think you kind of touched on it. I mean, it's not the most complex cigar in the world, and it's not supposed to be. I might not enjoy this smoking it on its own, but I don't think you're not supposed to. It's produced to be blended. I did smoke a fair amount of the stout by itself, and I found that more enjoyable. I think just on its own than the porter. There was a bit more sweetness to it, and it smelled like pipe tobacco, so there was a certain amount of that there. And it'll be interesting to talk about when we get there. I think we've kind of established without any real fact that these aren't infused. They're not infused cigars. They don't taste infused. They don't smell infused. They do smell. This one had the aroma on this wasn't quite as strong. I mean, with the stout, and we'll get there, it definitely had a pipe tobacco smell to it. What that means, I don't really know. But yeah, I think that at least this is the first one of the 5, so we're going to know them pretty well by the time we're done. But based on the porter, I feel like they did a good job of achieving the goal that they were after, which was making a cigar that's going to pair well with this type of beer. It paired, the only one I didn't like, oddly enough, was the recommendation, the London Porter. And that could just be a taste thing for me, because of the 3, the London Porter was my least favorite, by far.
So who do we, because we've got a cigar chat coming up tomorrow night, Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Who do we have coming up tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night we have Jordan Alexander III cigars, which I didn't know much about them leading into this, but the cigars are made by Casada, so it fits. We just had Casada on the show. I smoked the Corojo the other day, and I really enjoyed it. It's got a really nice Dominican Corojo profile to it. I think Logan's going to hate it. He hasn't smoked it yet. He's in India, so I don't think he'll get to it anytime soon. But the profile was really nice. I enjoyed it. So that'll be a fun show. They've been around for about a year and a half. So we've got them this week. Next week on Sharing Our Pairings, we're doing... Which one are we doing? We're doing the IPA.
We're doing the IPA, yeah. We're going probably the most difficult pairing of all 5. So we're going to go from possibly the easiest to possibly the most difficult. Did we plan that out? No, we don't plan anything here at Sharing Our Pairings. The fact that we have a sponsored show from Cigar.com for 5 shows in a row is a miracle. Testament to Rob's skill talking to Cigar.com, getting that sponsorship. Just want to thank Cigar.com for sending us the samples. Thanks to DrewEstate.com for blending these cigars and giving us a great experience here. And I hope everyone tunes in next week.
Yeah, for sure.
So, as we always say, we want you to drink better, drink less. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Special thanks to our podcast listeners. I know you guys are out there. We've got our podcast episodes squared away, so you should be seeing them a little bit quicker after the show airs, because I'm in charge of that now. And the MFM CEO can concentrate on other stuff that he cares about more, which is not sharing our pairings. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll hopefully see you next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah, and you got to close with your line, man.
Drink better, drink less.
There you go.